For over 40 years, Attorney Chip Nix has experience in personal injury claims involving the most serious and catastrophic injuries. Helping victims injured at work, at home, or on the road is Attorney Chip Nix's mission. The law offices of Attorney Chip Nix is committed to representing clients with integrity and getting the compensation they deserve. This evening, Attorney Chip Nix discusses the legal issues that affect you most. This is Justice for You with your host, Attorney Chip Nix.
Welcome to Justice for You, where we talk about what you need to know if you have been injured or if you are being denied justice. Tonight I have my friend Kent Hunt with me. He's back with me to talk about funeral home and cemetery cases. But before we do that, I would like to say thank you to the people who call us and who stop to talk to me when I'm out around town. Justice for You means helping you understand your legal rights and representing you in cases where we have expertise. Justice for You starts here, but it extends beyond here. Call us. We want to help you. Stop us if we're in a grocery store somewhere. I'd be delighted to talk with you. We want to make sure that you are educated with respect to your rights, that you know how to handle certain situations, and that you know how to get in touch with us if you ever need us. Kent, it's good to see you.
Thank you, Chip. It's good. I'm glad I'm here. It's always good to have this conversation with you, and I know we're going to continue with the educational process for all those viewers out there, just as you have from the beginning.
Yes, sir.
What are some of the cases that you're currently dealing with in your office?
Well, thanks for asking that. I wanted to say a little bit about some of our more recent cases that we've resolved. An example of one is a case where a group of teenagers were working at McDonald's. They got off work at night. It was pretty late in the evening, and a friend of theirs who was an older person, older than they were, picked them up in his pickup truck. Some of the kids rode in the way back of the pickup truck, in the bed of the pickup truck. And this person tried to scare him by the way he was driving, by the speed he was driving. And they cried out to him, called to him, please stop, let us out of here. Unfortunately, he did not stop. He missed a curve. Going around a curve, he hit an embankment. And our client's child, a son named Ryan, was thrown out of the back of the pickup truck and tragically killed. That is one of the cases we've been working on. Another case is where our client was hit from the rear and he suffered an annular tear. What is an annular tear? He was riding down the road, somebody overtook him and hit him from the rear, and his neck popped back, and he had a tear of the annulus in the spine. That's a ring or a circle of tissue that circles part of the spine. And this tissue actually tore, causing him a pretty bad injury. This was a young man, and he is going to have to live with that for a long time, Kent. So we made special care, took special care to make sure that he was compensated adequately in that case.
And as we know, when you say compensated adequately, that means that you're trying to take care of future medical needs as well as the immediate medical needs.
Absolutely right. He would be required to take medication. He would be required to have physical therapy. We seek to make sure that he's going to have enough money for that for the rest of his life. We also had a case where a lady picked up her two children from school. She drove to the stop sign right next to the school. At an intersection, there was a construction company that was conducting construction on a new part of the school, and they had a lull, or a four-wheel piece of construction machinery that was operating out there. And the lull driver had a big basket on the front of the lull. He couldn't see where he was going. He hit the lady from the rear and knocked her out into the intersection, where another car hit her and injured her and both of her children. We have a suit pending against the construction company right now in that case, and we feel very confident that we'll be able to take care of her and her children.
So, but all three of those are personal injury cases, I guess?
Those are all personal injury cases.
And that is one of your specialties in your practice?
Oh yeah, we've been doing this for over 40 years, and we feel like we really have a lot of experience in it. And you know, I try to tell people that the most important quality of any lawyer that you can hire is experience, because experience teaches you what to do in the case you're working on now. I've had other cases like the ones that I just told you about, and so I've had a lot of experience in handling a lot of different kinds of cases. We're not brand new lawyers.
Right.
We know what's going on, and we enjoy helping people with cases like this.
Well, and it shows too, one of the things too about that is the reason experience is so necessary too is the complexity of these cases is a primary concern, and that's where the experience comes in.
Right. You know, it's funny, just a simple automobile case has a lot of complexity now, because there are black boxes in vehicles. There are all kinds of ways to determine what the vehicle was doing at a particular time. There are just all kinds of complexities these days. So anyway, I want folks to know that these are the kinds of cases we're handling. Kent, we need to take a break real quick. After we come back from the break, we will tell everybody some stories about funeral home and cemetery cases. Very interesting. Join us when we come back. Hello, my name is Chip Nix. I'm here at the law offices of Chip Nix in Montgomery, Alabama. I want to tell you about a 20-year-old young man that we were able to help a few years ago. He lost his right hand in an industrial accident. We were able to provide a settlement for him that obtained two primary parts. The first thing we were able to do through the help of an artificial hand expert was to get him a bionic hand that really functions. And second, we were able to work with a financial company to provide, in addition to cash, $5,000 that will be paid to him on a monthly basis for the rest of his life. If you have a personal injury case, or if someone in your family has tragically been killed, call us. We will search for justice for you. Tell me, have you noticed the number of big trucks on the road now? That number has increased a lot, and that means more big truck wrecks. I'm Chip Nix. At Chip Nix Attorney at Law, we've recovered millions of dollars for clients in big truck wrecks, and we know the ropes. If you've been injured or a loved one has been killed in a big truck wreck, call us. Justice for you begins here.
For over 40 years, attorney Chip Nix has experience in personal injury claims involving the most serious and catastrophic injuries. Helping victims injured at work, at home, or on the road is attorney Chip Nix's mission. The law offices of attorney Chip Nix is committed to representing clients with integrity and getting the compensation they deserve. This evening, attorney Chip Nix discusses the legal issues that affect you most. This is Justice for You with your host, attorney Chip Nix.
Welcome back to Justice for You. Our topic tonight is funeral home cases and cemetery cases.
Chip, I got a question for you, if you don't mind entertaining the question before you really get started.
Sure thing.
Since we're talking about funeral home and cemetery cases, what are the most common complaints that you hear of from people, from your potential clients, about funeral homes and cemeteries?
Well, one of the most common things is that the marker that is purchased by the people who are attempting to have a funeral for their loved one, that the marker arrives so late. you would expect that the funeral home would have the marker available, but that's not the case. A lot of times they have to order the marker, and so frequently it becomes a case of last priority for a funeral home to get the marker out there. So not putting the marker up is a pretty common situation. The whole thing about funeral home and cemetery cases, Kent, as far as my cases have been, is that these cases arise because funeral homes and cemeteries do not have good policies and procedures. They either don't have any policies or procedures about how to do things, or they don't follow policies or procedures about how to do things. You'd be amazed at how many times we get a complaint about a person being buried in the wrong grave, a person that has actually been lost. And of course tonight we're going to talk about two such cases where a person was buried in the wrong grave and where a person actually was lost by the funeral home.
Well, if you want to, why don't we go ahead and move on into the one of those cases, whichever you choose to go first.
All right, let's talk about the one where the lady was actually buried in the wrong grave. This sweet lady had 3 daughters. When she passed away, they went to the funeral home and they signed a contract with the funeral home for a variety of funeral services and for the burial, and they bought a plot for the grave from the funeral home. Even though the funeral home did not own the cemetery, they had a deal with this cemetery company that they could sell plots. And so the funeral home sold the plot to these 3 ladies for their mother. The funeral home agreed to do everything that was necessary for the funeral service. The 3 daughters picked out the funeral service. They had the funeral service at the funeral home, and then a hearse took the body and the casket out to the grave. They had a graveside service, and there were a lot of relatives there and a lot of people that attended. A few weeks later, one of my clients went back to visit her mother's grave. Well, she couldn't find it because the marker had not been put down. She called the funeral home and she complained, why isn't the marker down? And it just wasn't down. They said, well, we had to order it, it'll be in soon. So she came back in about a month. Well, it still wasn't down. And she complained again, and they told her it was coming in soon. That happened 3 or 4 times. Well, they finally get the marker. The funeral home puts the marker out. One of my daughters, one of the ladies that I represented, went out to see her mother's grave, to visit it. She looked at the marker and where it was placed, and she knew right away that it was in the wrong place. So she went back to the funeral home. The funeral home continued to say to her, it's in the right place. We have not misplaced your mother's body. The marker is in the right place. Well, she came to us and she wanted us to help her find her mother's body because she was certain it wasn't in the right place. We had to file a lawsuit because we couldn't get assistance from the funeral home voluntarily, so we had to file a lawsuit. Well, in the discovery, which is, Kent, you know that when we file a case, we always submit written questions to the defendant, and we always submit requests for production of documents. In the discovery in the case, that's called discovery, we learned that this had happened before with this particular funeral home. We learned that this particular funeral home had misplaced a body before in a cemetery, that they had buried the person in the wrong grave before. We found about 3 instances in the 50-foot radius around where this funeral home said that they had buried this lady. Well, that was a real revelation to us. We began to realize that the funeral home had no idea where this lady was buried. For example, there should be in any cemetery a map of where all the bodies are. The funeral home did not have such a map. The cemetery did not have such a map. There was nothing to tell anybody where different people were buried except the markers that were put out if they were put in the right place. So it was quite a case. We determined that this had happened before. We found the identities of the people that had been affected, and we got them to testify for us in the case, saying, yeah, this happened to us too. That is something that we call pattern and practice. In other words, this particular funeral home had a pattern of doing this. And we believed it was a practice that was born of convenience and that was born of just trying to get the job done with as financially beneficial to the funeral home as they could get it done. But that case was quite something. You may have heard, Kent, of the Lincoln Cemetery.
Have, yes.
My understanding is that there are 700 markers out there at the Lincoln Cemetery, but there are over 5,000 people buried in that small space. That came out in the news a number of years ago. And I'm afraid that that was kind of what was going on at this other cemetery that we dealt with. I want everybody to know right now, we never tell the names of anybody, and we always change the facts up a little bit so that no one can really know what we're talking about. But we have to give examples, but we never reveal our clients' names.
And Chip, I know you're going to say this at some point because you always do, but it the thought just crossed my mind. When we're talking about examples and cases that you've dealt with, you are not implying that every funeral home and cemetery operates this way, because that's not the case. We all know that. What you deal with are the outliers. It's the few and far between where people are not following their policies and procedures if they have them, and most of the time they don't, or if
right.
But just want to put that out there because I know you want to make that point.
Absolutely, I appreciate that, Kent, because it's true. I mean, we're not on the warpath against cemeteries and funeral homes. I think most cemeteries and funeral homes do their very best to do a good job for their customers, and we're not saying that all of them do these things at all. Let me tell you about one other case. We're going to come back after the break, and I want to tell you kind of what happened in these cases. But we have another case we want to talk about where a child was born. It was the mother's first child. The child was stillborn. The parents took or had the child picked up by the funeral home, and the funeral home actually lost the body of the child. So we want to talk about that when we come back as well. Another thing I'd like to just talk about briefly is the religious and cultural significance of burials and funerals. Kent, it's unbelievable how important it is, I think universally to everybody, to make sure that your loved ones are taken care of, that they're properly buried, or if there's a cremation, they're properly cremated. It's a huge deal, and the types of damages that are awarded in cases like this are mental anguish and emotional distress damages, because the courts in Alabama have recognized that people get hurt bad when stuff like this happens. It's a very serious situation.
And not to make it seem too bad, but on the other hand, we all know the tragedy involved with the death of a loved one, and then
Absolutely.
the stress and strain of having to bury that loved one. And you're at your most weak point.
Absolutely.
And then to have somebody intentionally
Have something like this
take
happen,
advantage of it.
really bad. So Kent, we're going to take a quick break. We thank you for watching tonight, and we're going to come back and talk a little bit more about these two cases and tell you what happened in them. Thanks for watching. Come back to see us. Thanks. Some people say personal injury law is all about the money. Well, they're right. It's about the money to provide a bionic hand to a young man who has lost one of his in an accident. It's about the money for a family who has lost a mother due to a drunk driver. Yes, for the law offices of Chip Nix, it is about the money. It's about the money to help people salvage a decent life from the wreckage of someone else's carelessness. Justice for you begins here.
My name is John David Foshee. I looked for an attorney that I thought I could trust, and when I met Chip, I knew I was in the right place. Chip has been a great attorney. When you first meet him, you understand how serious he is about your case. Your case is the one that matters. And by the time you get through with your case, Chip's no longer just your attorney, but Chip's your friend. And people have asked me, would you recommend Chip? I have recommended Chip, and I will continue to recommend Chip.
I'm attorney Chip Nix, host of Justice for You. Justice for You applies not only to the clients we serve, but also to the community. At nixattorney.com, we provide answers to questions about personal injury with direct access to me and my associates. If you've been injured, contact me at 334-279-7770. Justice for You starts here. We're back with Justice for You.
Hey Chip, would you, before we broke, you said you had two cases you wanted to tell us about. You finished the first. Could you tell us about the second case that you had?
Sure. The second case relates to the baby that was stillborn and that the funeral home lost. This is what happened. The mother had the child. Unfortunately, the child was stillborn. They arranged for the funeral home to come pick the child up. The mother and the father went to the funeral home and made arrangements to have the child cremated. They paid what they could at that time. They entered into an agreement with the funeral home that the child would be cremated as soon as another organization in town made a payment toward the cremation. The mother would go back periodically to make her payments. Well, she would always ask, has my baby been cremated yet? I want to know. I want my baby to have been cremated. The other organization had made the payment that they were supposed to make, and the child should have already been cremated, but it was not, and they would tell her when she would come back that it was not. She went back a number of times making payments on it like this, and they continued to tell her it had not been done. Then they started telling her it had been done. But prior to that, she had asked to see the child. If you haven't cremated my baby, I want to see my baby. I want to make sure you've got my baby. Well, they couldn't find the child when she would do that. They couldn't find the child. Well, we filed suit, and after the suit was filed, they finally did apparently send a baby's body for cremation. When we got the records with respect to the cremation, it referred to the child as a girl, but the child was a boy. the real child. And so we knew then that they had lost the body of the child. It was a sad, sad, sad case. What we were able to do in that case was to eventually get some resolution. We certainly got a monetary resolution to it. It was very difficult to get any other kind of resolution in that case because there wasn't anything we could do for the mother to assure her that her baby had been properly taken care of. It was a very sad case, but we did obtain a large financial resolution. On the other case, the case where they buried the lady at a cemetery, we were able to get policies changed. We were able to make sure that this particular funeral home would follow up and do what was right in circumstances like that. In addition to getting a monetary award, we were able to cause them to make a change. So we've had a lot of these cases. We had another case where a man was shot and killed, sent for an autopsy, brought back, and was stored in a clear plastic bag with body fluids all over him. There is a specific statute in Alabama that says you shall not abuse a body, and they were guilty of this statute. It's a misdemeanor in Alabama, but it's also a civil action. Ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate your being with us tonight. Kent, thank you for being with me. I always enjoy seeing you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Come back and watch us next Sunday night on Justice for You.